I took the job because I needed the money. After finishing my EMT certification, I was struggling to find steady work. Bills were piling up, my rent was overdue, and I was tired of bouncing between side gigs and overnight shifts at a gas station. So when a hospital in western Pennsylvania posted an opening for a night shift patient transport technician, I applied immediately. I didn't even care that it was an overnight position in one of the hospital's oldest wings. Hell, I was just glad someone was finally calling me back. St. Emory Medical Center didn't look like the kind of hospital that belonged in 2023. The main building was modern enough, with sleek automatic doors, bright LED lighting, and all the usual smells of antiseptic and latex. But tucked behind it was an old annex wing seat, a 4-story red brick building that had been part of the original hospital since the 1940s, and that's where they assigned me. We're keeping C-Wing operational until the new expansion is done, my supervisor, Lisa, told me during orientation. You won't have too many patients, just a couple of long-term cases. Mostly you'll be handling labs, records, and supply runs between wings. Quiet work. She said it like it was a good thing. The first red flag should have been the security badge. Unlike the other techs, I was given a physical key in addition to my badge. Electronic locks don't work right down there, Lisa explained with a shrug. Old wiring or something. Just don't lose the key. We only have 2. The second red flag was how no one else wanted the shift. A few nurses gave me sympathetic looks when I clocked in that first night. One of them, an older woman with tired eyes, muttered, "You're braver than me." I smiled politely, trying to play it cool. I wasn't scared. Not really, not yet. At 11:42 p.m., I walked the long corridor from the main hospital to Wing C. The hallway was dimmer than the rest of the building, and the air felt different, heavier, colder. When I unlocked the double doors into C Wing, they creaked open like something out of a horror movie. I stepped inside, flipping on the old fluorescent lights overhead. Only half of them flickered to life. The place smelled like dust, bleach, and something metallic, maybe rust. My job was simple. Check on the patients on level 2, deliver any requested labs or charts, and do an hourly walkthrough. I also had a small desk near the nurses' station with an old black and white security monitor showing the hallway feeds. The system looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. That first hour was fine, quiet. I wheeled a blood sample to the lab, filed a patient chart, and made my first walkthrough. It was during the second walkthrough that something felt off. I had just passed the old surgical theater on level 3 when I heard a soft buzz from my desk phone. I walked back to answer. "Transport, this is Kyle." There was a pause, then a soft, crackling static. And then, "Room 313, help." The voice was faint, barely a whisper, a woman's voice, raspy, like she could barely speak. I stared at the phone. "I'm sorry, who is this?" No response, just that low, broken static. I hung up, checked the log sheet. Room 313 wasn't in use. According to the records, it had been closed for renovations after water damage last year. Still, I figured it was probably a mistake. Maybe someone was using an old line by accident. I grabbed my flashlight and headed to the 3rd floor. The hallway outside room 313 was darker than the rest. The overhead bulb was out. I approached slowly, heart starting to beat a little faster, and gently pushed the door open. The room was empty. No bed, no equipment, just a chair in the corner and peeling paint on the walls. The air was musty and cold. I stood there for a minute, waiting to hear something, anything, but the silence was complete. Back at the desk, I logged the incident in my notebook. I figured maybe it was an old call routed through the system. Lisa had said things glitched out in C-Wing sometimes. Still, when the phone buzzed again at 2:08 a.m., and I picked it up to hear that same rasping voice whisper, "It hurts, still here," I felt something twist in my stomach. I didn't sleep when I got home the next morning. This story seems to be getting scarier, doesn't it? If you want more stories like this, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. This helps create even more scary for you. I tried to tell myself it was just an old phone line, Maybe water had gotten into the cables, or rats. Hell, maybe some other staff member was screwing with me. I'd heard enough hazing stories to know that newbies sometimes got messed with, especially on night shifts. But something about the voice had felt too real, too desperate. By the end of my second night, I'd heard the voice twice more, once around 1:15 a.m., again at 3:06 a.m. Both times, it came through that old black desk phone with the yellowed buttons. Both times, the voice said nothing clear, just fragments, groans, a weak, dragging breath like someone was trying to talk through pain. Once, I thought I heard sobbing. I didn't tell anyone. I don't know why. Maybe part of me thought it was all in my head. Maybe I was afraid they'd laugh. On my third night, I brought my own small audio recorder, just in case. Everything was quiet until 2:42 a.m. Then the phone rang again. I hit record and answered. Transport. Static. Then, just barely, they left me. Please. I'm still here. I pressed the recorder closer to the speaker, heart pounding. Who's speaking? Can you hear me? Where are you? No response, just static. Then the line cut. When I played it back, there was nothing, just silence. Not even the static. The next night, the security monitor went black for 5 minutes between 3:10 and 3:15 a.m. Just a flicker, then total darkness on every camera feed. I called maintenance, but no one answered. I checked the breaker, nothing tripped. And then, when the cameras came back on, I saw it, a figure, standing in the hallway outside room 313. Just standing there, facing the wall. I froze, staring at the monitor. The figure wasn't moving, no swaying, no gestures, no shifting weight, just still, too still. I rushed upstairs. By the time I got to the third floor, the hallway was empty. Room 313 was still locked. I replayed the footage from the monitor feed, but it had reset. There was no saved footage between 3:10 and 3:15 a.m. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. On night 5, I finally asked Lisa, my supervisor, if anything strange had ever happened in C-Wing. She gave me a tight smile and shook her head. Old buildings make noise, she said, and night shifts mess with your head. You start seeing things, hearing things, you'll get used to it. I didn't get used to it. If anything, it got worse. On night 6, I was in the archive room on the ground floor, an old, windowless storage room filled with filing cabinets and ancient paper records. I was looking for a chart from the 1980s, back when the hospital was still a state-run facility. The archive room was cold, too cold. My breath came out in misty puffs. As I flipped through files, I heard a noise from the far corner of the room, like paper being dragged across the floor. I turned. No one. Then, louder this time, a cough. Deep, wet, like someone with fluid in their lungs. I backed out of that room fast and slammed the door behind me. Later that night, I checked the work logs. No one was supposed to be in C-Wing except me. Security didn't log any other staff, and none of the maintenance guys were on duty. I told myself it was just an old HVAC unit kicking on, or echoes from somewhere else in the hospital. But I didn't believe it. The final straw came on night 7. It was 3:26 a.m. I was doing my walkthrough when I heard it again, the whispering voice, this time not through the phone. It was coming from down the hallway, from room 313. The door was slightly open, not locked like usual. Light spilled out from underneath. I didn't move, I just stood there, frozen, staring at that cracked door and the strip of yellow light glowing beneath it. Then the voice came again. Please don't leave, not again. I turned and walked away. I didn't care about the log. I didn't care if Lisa wrote me up. I didn't even care if I got fired. I just needed to be out of that hallway. And as I walked, I swear I heard the sound of footsteps following me, soft, shuffling, like someone in socks dragging their feet just a few steps behind. But every time I turned around, the hallway was empty. I wasn't planning to come back after that night. I was ready to quit, walk out, and never set foot in Wing C again. But I couldn't let it go. Not just the voice, not just room 313, but the way everyone avoided talking about it, like the whole building was a bad memory the hospital had tried to bury without actually tearing it down. That next morning, I went home, didn't sleep, and started digging. First, I searched public records for St. Emory Medical Center. Nothing too unusual popped up until I started looking for Wing C specifically. Turns out, Wing C had been shut down once before, back in 1996, due to internal restructuring and safety violations. That's all the report said. No details, no explanation, just a quiet, bureaucratic way of saying something had gone seriously wrong. The building reopened in 2001 after some renovations, but most of it remained underused, especially the third floor. And then I found something that made my stomach turn. An old newspaper clipping from the Pittsburgh Daily Ledger, dated March 3, 1996. Hospital investigates unexplained patient deaths. St. Emory Medical Center has launched an internal investigation following the deaths of 3 patients over a 2-week period in the hospital's older Wing C. Sources inside the hospital say all 3 deaths occurred under similar circumstances: sudden respiratory failure and unresponsive vital signs despite no prior complications. One anonymous nurse said, "We've had equipment failures and strange behavior with the call system for months. It's like the building itself is falling apart, and now people are dying." There were no follow-ups, nothing about what the investigation found. The story vanished. That night, I brought the article to work and confronted Lisa. She didn't look surprised. "Where did you find that?" she asked quietly. "Public archive." She looked at me for a long time before finally saying, "That was a long time ago. Different staff, different management. You shouldn't worry about it." Was room 313 one of the ones where it happened? She didn't answer, just looked away. I didn't let it go. That night, I went back to the archive room. I figured if the old files were still there, I could find patient records from 1996, maybe even from that specific room. It took over an hour, but I found them. Buried deep in a rusted filing cabinet was a box marked "3rd floor, patient incidents, 95 to 97. Inside were paper records, most of them handwritten, faded, or stained with time. One chart caught my eye. Patient, Lenora Hensley, age, 68, admitted, February 14, 1996. Diagnosis, recovery from hip surgery, room 313, condition stable, recovered well post-surgery. Date of death, February 19, 1996. COD, sudden respiratory collapse during night shift. No warning signs. Nurse on duty reported patient had pressed call button moments before system failed. The notes were messy, but something stood out. A scribble in the margin, almost scratched out entirely. Patient was found with oxygen line disconnected. No signs of self-removal. Incident not consistent with medical error. Request internal review. I kept reading. There were 2 more patients, both in rooms close to 313, both dead under similar circumstances within days of each other. The attending physician listed was the same for all 3, Dr. Evan S. Kearns. I'd never heard the name before. I went to the hospital's digital directory. He wasn't listed, not even in the archives. Like he'd been erased. That night during my walkthrough, the phone didn't ring, but as I passed room 313, I noticed something different. The door was fully closed this time, but the light underneath was still on. I walked past it quickly, trying not to look at the door, trying not to let my imagination fill in the blanks. Back at the desk, I opened the file again and stared at Lenora's intake photo. Old, tired eyes, oxygen tubes, a little smile. And for a second, just a second, I thought I saw that same face flash on the security monitor, standing just behind the nurse's station in the hallway. No sound, no motion, just a shape that looked like her. Then the screen glitched and went black again. I couldn't stop thinking about the name, Dr. Evan S. Kearns. The man had been listed as the attending physician on all 3 patient deaths in 1996, but he didn't exist anymore, not in the hospital system, not in the state medical board registry, not even in the alumni database for nearby universities. It was like he'd been wiped off the face of the earth. I called an old classmate of mine, Jessica, who worked part-time in hospital administration. She agreed to check a few off-record databases for me. That evening, she texted, "Found something, he was fired. Internal investigation, but it's all sealed. No public records. I'd be careful if I were you." That last sentence chilled me. Why did it feel like everyone who did know something was trying hard not to say it out loud? I started asking around quietly. One of the older janitors, Marco, finally gave in. Dr. Kearns was obsessed. He told me. I starting around like someone might be listening. He stayed late, slept here sometimes. After those patients died, there were rumors that he was doing things to them, unapproved trials, some kind of oxygen therapy no one had cleared. What happened to him? They said he left town, but I heard from a nurse that security found something in the basement after he disappeared. Equipment, paperwork, blood. Blood? He nodded, then walked away without another word. The next night was different. I felt it the second I stepped into C-Wing. The air was heavier, the silence louder, and the phone didn't ring all night. But something else did. At 2:11 a.m., the intercom system crackled to life. Not the phone, the intercom, the one mounted near the ceiling above my desk. No one had used it since I started working there. And then a voice, room 313, not a whisper, not static, just a flat, cold voice. Then silence. I grabbed my flashlight, heart hammering, and went up to the third floor. Again. Room 313 was dark now. The door was slightly open again. No light underneath, no sound. I raised my hand to push the door open wider, but something slammed from the inside. Not a gust of air, not creaking pipes. A deliberate, violent slam, like someone was on the other side, warning me to stay out. I backed away fast. I didn't write anything in the log. I didn't even go back to my desk. I sat in the supply closet until my shift ended at 7 a.m. That morning, I made a decision. I went back to the archives one last time, looking for any staff records tied to Kearns. I didn't expect to find anything, but I did. Hidden in a folder marked Facilities Access Requests, 1995 to 1997 was a single-page memo. Requester, Dr. Evan S. Kearns. Date, January 18, 1996. Access needed, Sublevel 1 Storage/Experimental Lab. Purpose, Post-op oxygenation monitoring and neurological assessments. Authorization, illegible signature. Sublevel 1. I'd never heard of it, wasn't listed on any of the maps. I brought it to Lisa that night. She took one look and froze. Where did you get this? The archives. What's Sublevel 1? She shook her head slowly. There is no Sublevel 1. That part of the building was closed off decades ago, before I even started. But it's under Wing C? Yes, and it's off limits. Don't go down there, Kyle. I'm serious. That was the first time she ever looked genuinely afraid. So of course, I went. Around 3:30 a.m., I found an old service elevator behind the laundry chute on the first floor. It hadn't worked in years, but there was a metal access ladder bolted to the shaft wall. I climbed down. What I found below Wing C wasn't just a storage room. It was a long hallway, half lit by flickering emergency bulbs, walls covered in cracked tiles and exposed wiring. At the far end was a room with a heavy steel door slightly ajar. Inside were rusted medical beds, machines covered in dust, stacks of manila folders, and a nameplate on the desk. Dr. Evan S. Kearns. I stepped closer and saw a clipboard still resting on the desk. The final entry read, Patient 313 unresponsive to forced oxygen trial, preparing next test, must not alert staff upstairs. That's when I heard it again. The same voice. From behind me. Soft, breathless. Don't leave me. I spun around, light trembling in my hand. No one was there. I froze. For a moment, I was sure the voice was in my head, that I had finally cracked under the pressure of nights spent in that empty, haunted building. But then I heard it again, soft, desperate, barely a whisper from behind me. Please. I'm still here. Don't leave me. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing, just the same rusted medical equipment, the same stacks of old papers, and that damn desk with Dr. Kearns's nameplate. I walked out of the room, back down the hallway, still hearing that voice in my mind, don't leave me. But I didn't leave. I couldn't, I was too close. The next few hours were a blur. I grabbed as many records as I could from the sub-level storage room, making sure to photograph everything. There were lab notes, experiment logs, treatment protocols, some of which were decades old. But there was something I didn't understand. Why didn't anyone know about this room? Why had it been sealed off? I needed more answers, so I kept digging. Back in the hospital's main archives, I found more information on Dr. Evan S. Kearns. It wasn't just that he had been a doctor working at St. Emory. No, his specialization was experimental treatments, especially with high-risk patients. He had a history of unapproved experiments. In fact, his work had been flagged multiple times by the medical board for its unethical nature, but there were never any official charges, no public records of anything substantial. The final piece of the puzzle came when I stumbled upon a patient intake form buried in the back of a file cabinet. The name, Lenora Hensley. The date, February 1996. I stared at the form for a long time. Patient history, surgery for fractured hip, complications during recovery, severe lung condition, primary care, Dr. Evan S. Kearns. Treatment plan, experimental high oxygen therapy. Note, patient may show signs of hypoxia. Lenora Hensley wasn't just an unlucky patient, she wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was part of a clinical trial. Dr. Kearns had been conducting illegal, unapproved oxygenation tests on high-risk patients, patients who had no chance of surviving. He used them as experiments. The files I found confirmed it. Lenora and the other patients who died in 1996 were not just victims of bad luck, they were victims of Kearns's obsession with finding a cure for respiratory failure, no matter the cost. The hospital didn't know, the staff didn't know. Dr. Kearns had done his work in secret. Wing C was his testing ground. And after the 3 deaths, the hospital covered it up. They shut down Wing C. But the building wasn't demolished. They left it standing, left it to rot, to be forgotten, because they couldn't afford to admit what had happened. I didn't sleep that night, or the next night. I stayed at the hospital, going through every file, every record, but the deeper I went, the worse it got. The recordings, I listened to every single one, the static, the whispers, it was all real. Every voice that I heard on the phone, every patient's plea for help, was from the past, from patients who never left, the patients who had died under Kearns's care. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the truth was worse than I'd ever imagined. Dr. Kearns wasn't just trying to find a cure, he was performing experiments on people, living, breathing people who had no idea they were being used as test subjects. The final nail in the coffin came when I returned to the old service elevator. It hadn't occurred to me before, but when I went back down to sub-level 1, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was another door. It was smaller than the one I had found earlier, hidden behind a rusted filing cabinet. I opened it. What I found was a room full of old medical records, but also something else: files, patient histories. I grabbed one folder at random and opened it. Patient, Sarah Monroe. Age, 22. Diagnosis, acute lung failure. Treatment, experimental oxygen therapy, same protocol as Lenora Hensley. Outcome, deceased. But it didn't stop there. There were dozens of names, hundreds of files, each one a life cut short. Kearns hadn't just killed 3 people, he had murdered dozens, maybe more, in the name of science, and the hospital had covered it all up. By the time I got back upstairs, it was morning. I didn't bother with the logbook. I didn't need to. I knew what I had to do. I walked straight to the front office and handed in my resignation. I didn't say a word, I just walked out, leaving the building behind me. I don't know what happened to Kearns. I don't know if anyone ever found out the full extent of his experiments, but I know one thing for sure. I'm never going back to St. Emory Medical Center. I can still hear those voices sometimes, and I know they're not just in my head. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts on this terrifying story, and subscribe for more spine-chilling horror tales.